Hi, it's Mark from Top Local. We're here with Bernie Pawlik of Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, serving Vancouver area motorists for 38 years, fixing all makes and models of cars and trucks, and 18-time winners of Best Auto Repair in Vancouver. How are you doing, Bernie?
Doing very well.
So we're going to talk about a 2005 Nissan Sentra that had a fuel injector replacement. What was going on with this car?
This vehicle was towed to our shop with a no start condition. It would the engine would crank over but wouldn't start. And what we found is that in doing our diagnosis, we removed the ignition coils and spark plugs, and often a no start will be an ignition issue of some sort. But what we found was actually several cylinders full of fuel. When you crank the engine over with the spark plugs out, there would be fuel spraying out. So there's a extreme amount of fuel being leaked inside the engine.
So how can an injector leak fuel into a cylinder like that?
Well, the injector is meant to only inject fuel. Well, there's two things. There's pressure, which comes from the fuel pump, so it's under pressure, and it's only meant to inject fuel when it receives an electronic signal from the fuel injection computer. What was happening in the case of at least two of the injectors in this vehicle, they were worn out to the point where they were actually dripping a bit of fuel, even with the lack of injector signal. So once you turn the key off, that residual pressure was being leaked down in through the fuel injector into the cylinder.
So I'll ask the obvious question, why wouldn't the car start even with the fuel building the cylinder like that?
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, you've got your fuel, you need air, you need fuel and spark, and so that was all happening. But when you have too much fuel, the engine won't start because it'll actually drown out the spark. Once the piston comes up, there's so much liquid that it won't allow a spark to occur. And air and fuel needs to be mixed at a certain ratio, usually about 14:1 air to fuel. Well, when you have like a whole half a cylinder full of fuel, the ratio is a little out. And interestingly enough, liquid gasoline actually doesn't burn. It's only the vapor. So theoretically, you could actually throw a match onto liquid gasoline and it won't burn. But the only thing is it always vaporizes, so that's what catches fire. But gasoline is very volatile. It vaporizes extremely easily, but not when you have too much.
So how many injectors were bad?
Well, there was at least two, but we could see drips on most of them. So at this point, I'll share some photos. Let's get right into it here. So here's the top of our Sentra engine. So this is these are the cylinder holes with the ignition coils and spark plugs removed. And here we actually have the injector rail out, so you can actually see the fuel injectors, and you can see a little, kind of hard to look, but you can see a little bit of moistness around the tips of these injectors. And really, there should be none there. They should be dry, unless you've actually fired the engine. But there was leakage on at least two of these injectors. Let's go to our other photo here. What do we got? Here's another view of the top of the engine again, looking down. I was kind of hoping to capture, because you can actually, you point a flashlight down the cylinder, you can actually see some of the liquid fuel. But anyways, this is sort of a view of the top of the engine. This is the valve cover. Spark plugs sit right in the middle of the cylinder, and then the fuel injector rail sits right over here. So that's where the injectors are, and they fire fuel into the intake manifold on this particular engine. It's a port fuel injection system.
Was there any other components damaged from the leaking injectors?
Well, the spark plugs were. What happens? I mean, when you end up having that much fuel, it ends up damaging the spark plugs. So we replaced the spark plugs. That seemed to be the only issue that was visible. And once we replaced the injectors and the spark plugs, the engine ran great and ran fine. But there are, having that much fuel running into an engine does actually create a problem. It washes down the cylinder walls of the oil that's there to lubricate the cylinder walls, because gasoline is not a great lubricant. So it can wash down, and it can cause damage to the pistons, the piston rings, and the cylinder walls.
So how would someone know if there was cylinder or piston ring damage?
Well, you would know because first of all, the engine compression could be bad. So, and you would know because the engine would misfire and run rough. In the case of this engine, it wasn't rough. So I think the problem was caught pretty early. I mean, the other area of damage that you could note, it's more subtle, it would take a while, is the engine would start burning oil. And that would be another thing that that you know, you would notice over time. So if you have your engine that's all of a sudden starting to burn oil, it may be that from this issue that the lifespan of these engine may be shortened. It's hard to know. It's, you know, that's something given over time, but that's the kind of thing. If it drives and it runs well and doesn't really use any oil, nothing really to worry about. You just kind of let it go and see what happens.
So how often do you replace fuel injectors in gasoline engines?
You know, we don't do them all that often. I'm thinking about like diesels, we tend to do them a lot more often, but in the diesel, the injector's so critical to the whole process of the combustion that, you know, any subtle thing can cause a problem. But gasoline injectors tend to last quite a long time. And surprisingly, it seems like Nissans over the years have replaced more fuel injectors than Nissans than any other brand. I'm not sure why that is. And a lot of times with fuel injectors usually have one or two problems. Well, one of a few problems. Either they won't work, they'll leak internally like these, or they'll leak externally. So like an external leak, you'll notice if you smell raw gasoline around the engine. Sometimes, you know, you can see the actual body of the injector leaking. And that seems to have been over the last, you know, 25 years, a common issue with Nissans. But we don't do a lot of injectors. They're fairly reliable.
And how are Nissan Sentras for reliability?
Yeah, overall, they're pretty good cars. I mean, they're, you know, sort of a lower end car, but they're very reliable. I would, you know, if you're looking for a good A to B kind of car that's reliable and doesn't have too many problems, I would definitely recommend a Sentra. It's a good vehicle.
So there you go. If you're looking for a service for your Nissan Sentra or any Nissan product in Vancouver, the guys to see are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112. They are busy, so book ahead. Or call them, or check out their website at pawlikautomotive.com or on YouTube, Pawlik Automotive. Search for that. There's hundreds of videos on there, all makes and models. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark.